Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy-Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now, and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to take a couple of minutes and ask for a little bit of support. If you're listening to Sleepy-Time Tales regularly and it's helping you to get a good night's sleep, please consider helping me to keep going out to thousands of insomniacs like you by supporting on Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on your contribution level. From as little as $2 a month, you get weekly access to early release on the main episodes, so that you get your fresh sleep aid on a Wednesday. And $5 gets you weekly bonus minisodes, special edits, and a monthly megasode, which is all of the previous month's releases in one big listen. Tonight I'd like to thank and shout out Deborah for signing up to the Patreon. She's helping me to cover costs and keep Sleepy-Time Tales available. Welcome to the Sleepy-Time Tales family, Deborah. I'm very thankful for your support. But if monthly seems like a big ask, then you can make once-off tips through the tip jar on the website. There is a basic merchandise store up on the TeePublic store, which you can reach through the show notes or via the website. There is also our partnership with SleepPhones, which are headphones designed specifically to wear to sleep. They're a lot more comfortable than most other options many people are probably using. Again, the link's in the show notes. And another huge way to help the show is simply to tell people about it. If you know people who are struggling to sleep, just spread the word. If you tell people on social media, please make sure to tag me in at Sleepy-Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter so that I can see and I can say thanks. And that's really the best ways to help this show. Last but not least, of course, I've got to shout out the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiku. Their music is available on their website at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. Thanks for taking the time. Let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy-Time Tales? What is it for? What is this strange idea, this strange thing, this podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to? But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy-Time Tales is intended mostly to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night. Or maybe you can use it as background noise or even simply company. That's why I make these episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you without any pressure of the end coming. As far as I know, there are a couple of different ways to engage with the show. The primary idea is that it gives you something to focus on, a story or an event that lets you keep your mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties, to focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for you. Or maybe you need some kind of background noise. People like white noise or the sound of the ocean, the wind in the trees, or maybe just some boring dude droning on. It's important though, as you listen, try not to force the sleep. As I'm talking, just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story and allow the need for sleep to come for you. I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but don't feel pressurized. If this is your first night, this probably won't work for you. It'll probably take a few nights to get used to listening to my voice. Maybe my accent is strange to you. Maybe initially at least one episode just isn't long enough. Or maybe your problem isn't so much going to sleep. Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night. What I recommend, because of what works for me, is to let the podcast run all night. Download a whole bunch of episodes into your podcast player of choice, put them in a playlist, and let them go. That way, if it's still running and you find yourself awake at 3 a.m., you can just pop your earbuds back in and allow yourself to go straight back to sleep again. Sometimes I even wake up 30 minutes before my alarm goes. Well, usually I carry on listening and it knocks me right back out. And I can tell you that may seem strange, but that 30 minutes can be the best part of my night. There's something about allowing yourself to relax completely right before the alarm that's satisfying on a whole different, deep level. But it's important, though, as you're listening, that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you. So give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. We return to the Elements of Geology by William Harmon Norton. Chapter 2. The Work of Groundwater. Land waters. We have seen how large is the part that water plays at and near the surface of the land, in the processes of weathering and in the slow movement of waste down all slopes to the streamways. We now take up the work of water as it descends beneath the ground, a corrosive agent still, and carrying in solution as its load the invisible waste of rocks derived from their soluble parts. Land waters have their immediate source in the rainfall. By the heat of the sun, water is evaporated from the reservoir of the ocean and from moist surfaces everywhere. Mingled as vapor with the air, it is carried by the winds over sea and land, and condensed it returns to the earth as rain or snow. That part of the rainfall which descends on the ocean does not concern us, but that which falls on the land accomplishes, as it returns to the sea, the most important work of all surface geological agencies. The rainfall may be divided into 3 parts. The first dries up, being discharged into the air by evaporation, either directly from the soil or through vegetation. The second runs off over the surface to flood the streams. The third soaks in the ground, and is henceforth known as ground or underground water. The descent of groundwater. Seeping through the mantle of waste, groundwater soaks into the pores and crevices of the underlying rock. All rocks of the upper crust of the earth are more or less porous, and all drink in water. Impervious rocks, such as granite, clay, and shale, have pores so minute that the water which they take in is held fast within them by capillary attraction, and none drains through. Pervious rocks, on the other hand, such as many sandstones, have pore spaces so large that water filters through them more or less freely. Besides its seepage through the pores of previous rocks, water passes to lower levels to the joints and cracks, by which all rocks near the surface are broken. Even the closest grained granite has a pore space of 1 in 400, while sandstone may have a pore space of 1 in 4. Sand is so porous that it may absorb 1/3 of its volume of water, and a loose loam even as much as 1/2. The groundwater surface is the name given the upper surface of groundwater, the level below which all rocks are saturated. In dry seasons, the groundwater's surface sinks, for groundwater is constantly seeping downward under gravity. It is evaporated in the waste, and its moisture is carried upward by capillary and the roots of plants to the surface to be evaporated in the air. In wet seasons, these constant losses are more than made good by fresh supplies from that part of the rainfall which soaks into the ground, and the groundwater surface rises. In moist climates, the groundwater surface lies, as a rule, within a few feet of the land surface, and conforms to it in a general way, although with slopes of less inclination than those of the hills and valleys. In dry climates, permanent groundwater may be found only at depths of hundreds of feet. Groundwater is held at its height by the fact that its circulation is constantly impeded by capillarity and friction. If it were as free to drain away as our surface streams, it would sink soon after a rain to the level of the deepest valleys of the region. Wells and springs. Excavations made in permeable rocks below the groundwater surface fall to its level and are known as wells. Where valleys cut the surface, permanent streams are formed, the water either oozing forth along ill-defined areas or issuing at definite points called springs, where it is concentrated by the structure of the rocks. A level tract where the groundwater surface coincides with the surface of the ground is a swamp or marsh. By studying a spring, one may learn much of the ways and work of groundwater. Spring water differs from that of the stream into which it flows in several respects. If we test the spring with a thermometer during successive months, we shall find that its temperature remains much the same the year round. In summer it is markedly cooler than the stream. In winter it is warmer and remains unfrozen, while the latter perhaps is locked in ice. This means that its underground path must lie at such a distance from the surface that it is little affected by summer's heat and winter's cold. While the stream is often turbid with surface waste washed into it by rains, the spring remains clear. Its water has been filtered during its slow movement through many small underground passages and the pores of rocks. Commonly, the spring differs from the stream in that it carries a far larger load of dissolved rock. Chemical analysis proves that streams contain various minerals in solution, but these are usually in quantities so small that they are not perceptible to the taste or feel. But the water of springs is often well charged with soluble minerals. In its slow, long journey underground, it has searched out the soluble parts of the rocks through which it seeps, and has dissolved as much of them as it could. When spring water is boiled away, the invisible load which it has carried is left behind, and in composition is found to be practically identical with that of the soluble ingredients of the country rock. Although to some extent the soluble waste of rocks is washed down surface slopes by the rain, by far the larger part is carried downward by groundwater and is delivered to streams by springs. In limestone regions, springs are charged with calcium carbonate, carbonate of lime, and where the limestone is magnesian, they contain magnesium carbonate also. Such waters are hard. When used in washing, the minerals which they contain combine with the fatty acids of soap to form insoluble curdy compounds. When springs rise from rocks containing gypsum, they are hard with calcium sulfate. In granite regions, they contain more or less soda and potash from the decay of feldspar. The flow of springs varies much less during the different seasons of the year than does that of surface streams. So slow is the movement of groundwater through the rocks that even during long droughts, large amounts remain stored above the level of surface drainage. Groundwater is in constant movement towards its outlets. Its rate varies according to many conditions, but always is extremely slow. Even through loose sands beneath the beds of rivers, it sometimes does not exceed a fifth of a mile a year. In any region, two zones of flow may be distinguished. The upper zone of flow extends from the groundwater surface downward through the waste mantle, and any permeable rocks on which the mantle rests, as far as the first impermeable layer, where the descending movement of the water is stopped. The deep zones of flow occupy any pervious rocks which may be found below the impervious layer, which lies nearest to the surface. The upper zone is a vast sheet of water saturating the soil and rocks, and slowly seeping downward through their pores and interstices along the slopes to the valleys, where in part it discharges in springs and often unites also in a wide underflowing stream which supports and feeds the river. A city in a region of copious rains, built on narrow floodplain of a river, overlooked by hills, depends for its water supply on driven wells, within the city limits, sunk in the sand a few yards from the edge of the stream. Are these wells fed by water from the river percolating through the sand, or by groundwater on its way down to the stream, and possibly contaminated with the sewage of the town? At what height does underground water stand in the wells of your region? Does it vary with the season? Have you ever known wells to go dry? It may be possible to get data from different wells, and to draw a diagram showing the groundwater surface as compared with the surface of the ground. Fissure springs and artesian wells. The deeper zones of flow lie in previous strata, which are overlain by some impervious stratum. Such layers are often carried by the dip to great depths, and water may circulate in them to far below the level of the surface streams, and even of the sea. When a fissure crosses a water-bearing stratum or aquifer, water is forced upward by the pressure of the weight of the water contained in the higher parts of the stratum, and may reach the surface as a fissure spring. A boring which taps such an aquifer is known as an artesian well, a name derived from a province in France, where wells of this kind have long been in use. The rise of the water in artesian wells, and in fissure springs also, depends on the following conditions. The aquifer dips towards the region of the wells from higher ground, where it outcrops and receives its water. It is enclosed between an impervious layer above and watertight or waterlogged layers underneath. The weight of the column of water thus enclosed in the aquifer causes water to rise in the well, precisely as the weight of the water in a standpipe forces it in connected pipes to the upper stories of buildings. Which will supply the larger regions with artesian wells? An aquifer whose dip is steep, or one whose dip is gentle? Which of the two aquifers, the thickness being equal, will have the larger outcrop, and therefore be able to draw upon the larger amount of water from the rainfall? The zone of solution. Near the surface, where the circulation of groundwater is most active, it oxidizes, corrodes, and dissolves the rocks through which it passes. It leaches soils and subsoils of their lime and other soluble minerals upon which plants depend for their food. It takes away the soluble cements of rocks. It widens fissures and joints, and opens winding passages along the bedding planes. It may even remove whole beds of soluble rocks, such as rock salt, limestone, or gypsum. The work of groundwater in producing landslides has already been noticed. The zone in which the work of groundwater is thus for the most part destructive, we may call the zone of solution. Caves. In massive limestone rocks, groundwater dissolves channels, which sometimes form large caves. The necessary conditions for the excavation of caves of great size are well shown in central Kentucky, where an upland is built throughout of thick horizontal beds of limestone. The absence of layers of insoluble or impervious rock in its structure allows a free circulation of groundwater within it by the way of all natural openings in the rock. These waterways have been gradually enlarged by solution and wear, until the upland is honeycombed with caves. 500 open caverns are known in one county. Mammoth Cave, the largest of these caverns, consists of a labyrinth of chambers and winding galleries, whose total length is said to be as much as 30 miles. One passage 4 miles long has an average width of about 60 feet and an average height of 40. One of the great halls is 300 feet in width and is overhung by a solid arch of limestone 100 feet above the floor. Galleries at different levels are connected by well-like pits, some of which measure 225 feet from top to bottom. Through some of the lowest of these tunnels flows Echo River, still at work dissolving and wearing away the rock while on its dark way to appear at the surface as a great spring. Natural bridges. As a cavern enlarges and the surface of the land above it is lowered by weathering, the roof at last breaks down and the cave becomes an open ravine. A portion of the roof may for a while remain, forming a natural bridge. Sinkholes. In limestone regions, channels underground may become so well developed that the water of rains rapidly drains away through them. Groundwater stands low and wells must be sunk deep to find it. Little or no water is left to form brooks. Thus, across the limestone upland of central Kentucky, one meets but 3 surface streams in 100 miles. Between their valleys, surface water finds its way underground by means of sinkholes. These are pits, commonly funnel-shaped, formed by the enlargement of crevice or joint by percolating water, or by the breakdown of some portion of the roof of a cave. By clogging of the outlet, a sinkhole may come to be filled by a pond. Central Florida is a limestone region with its drainage largely subterranean, and in part below the level even of the sea. Sinkholes are common, and many of them are occupied by lakelets. Great springs mark the point of issue of underground streams, while some rise from beneath the sea. Silver Spring, one of the largest, discharges from a basin 800 feet wide and 30 feet deep, a little river navigable for small steamers to its source. About the spring there are no surface streams for 60 miles. The Karst. Along the eastern coast of the Adriatic, as far south as Montenegro, lies a belt of limestone mountains singularly worn and honeycombed by the solvent action of water. Where forests have been cut from the mountainsides and the red soil has washed away, the surface of the white limestone forms a pathless desert of rock, where each square rod has been corroded into an intricate branchwork of shallow furrows and sharp ridges. Great sinkhole. some of them 600 feet deep and more, pockmark the surface of the land. The drainage is chiefly subterranean. Surface streams are rare, and a portion of their course is often underground. Fragmentary valleys come suddenly to an end at walls of rock, where the rivers which occupy the valleys plunge into dark tunnels, to reappear some miles away. Groundwater stands so far below the surface that it cannot be reached by well, and the inhabitants depend on rainwater stored for household uses. The finest cavern in Europe, the Adelsberg Grotto, is in this region. Karst, the name of a part of this country, is now used to designate any region or landscape thus sculpted by the chemical action of surface and groundwater. We must remember that karst regions are rare, and striking as is the work of the subterranean streams, it is far less important than the work done by the sheets of underground water, slowly seeping through all subsoils and porous rocks in other regions. Even when gathered into definite channels, groundwater does not have the erosive power of surface streams, since it carries with it little or no rock waste. Regions whose underground drainage is so perfect that the development of surface streams has been retarded or prevented escape to a large extent the leveling action of surface running waters, and may therefore stand higher than the surrounding country. The hill honeycombed by Luray Cavern, Virginia, has been attributed to this cause. Cavern deposits. Even in the zone of solution, water may under certain circumstances deposit as well as erode. As it trickles from the roof of caverns, the lime carbonate, which it has taken into solution from the layers of limestone above, is deposited by evaporation in the air, in icicle-like pendants called stalactites. As the drops splash on the floor, they are built in the same way, thicker masses called stalagmites, which may grow to join the stalactites above, forming pillars. A stalagmitic crust often seals with rock the earth, which accumulates in caverns, together with whatever relics of cave dwellers, either animals or men, it may contain. The zone of cementation. With increasing depths, subterranean water becomes more and more sluggish in its movements, and more highly charged with minerals, dissolved from the rocks above. At such depths, it deposits these minerals in the pores of rocks, cementing their grains together, and in crevices and fissures, forming mineral veins. Thus, below the zone of solution, where the work of water is to dissolve, lies the zone of cementation, where its work is chemical deposit. A part of the invisible load of waste is thus transferred from rocks near the surface to those at greater depths. As the land surface is gradually lowered by weathering and the work of rain and streams, rocks which have lain deep within the zone of cementation are brought within the zone of solution. Thus they are exposed to severe limestones, whose cracks were filled with calcite, crystallized carbonate of lime, with quartz or other minerals, and sandstones whose grains were well cemented many feet below the surface. Cavity filling. Small cavities in the rocks are often found more or less completely filled with minerals deposited from solution by water and its constant circulation underground. The processes may be illustrated by the deposit of salt crystals in a cup of evaporating brine. But in the latter instance, the solution is not renewed, as in the case of cavities in the rocks. A cavity thus lined with inward-pointing crystals is called a geode. Concretions. Groundwater seeping through the pores of rocks may gather minerals disseminated throughout them into nodular masses called concretions. Thus, silica disseminated through limestone is gathered into nodules of flint, while geodes grow from the outside inwards. Concretions grow outwards from the center. Nor are they formed in already existing cavities as are geodes. In soft clays, concretions may, as they grow, press the clay aside. In many other rocks, concretions are made by the process of replacement. Molecule by molecule, the rock is removed, and the mineral of the concretion substituted in its place. The concretion may in this way preserve intact the lamination lines or other structures of the rock. Clays and shales often contain concretions of lime carbonate, of iron carbonate, or of iron sulfide. Some fossils, such as leaf or shell, frequently forms the nucleus around which the concretion grows. Deposits of groundwater in arid regions. In arid lands, where groundwater is drawn by capillarity to the surface and there evaporates, it leaves as surface incrustations the minerals held in solution. White, limy incrustations of this nature cover considerable tracts in northern Mexico. Evaporating beneath the surface, groundwater may deposit a limy cement in beds of loose sand and gravel. Such firmly cemented layers are not uncommon in western Kansas and Nebraska, where they are known as mortar beds. Thermal springs. While the lower limit of surface drainage is sea level, subterranean water circulates much below that depth and is brought again to the surface by hydrostatic pressure. In many instances, springs have a higher temperature than the average annual temperature of the region, and are then known as thermal springs. In regions of present or recent volcanic activity, such as the Yellowstone National Park, we may believe that the heat of thermal springs is derived from uncooled lavas, perhaps not far below the surface. But when hot springs occur at a distance of hundreds of miles from any volcano, as is the case of the hot springs of Bath, England, it is probable that their waters have risen from the heated rocks of Earth's interior. The springs of Bath have a temperature of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 70 degrees above the average annual temperature of the place. If we assume that the rate of increase in the Earth's internal heat is here the average rate, 1 degree Fahrenheit to every 60 feet of descent, we may conclude that the springs of Bath rise from at least a depth of 4,200 feet. Water may descend to depths from which it can never be brought back by hydrostatic pressure. It is absorbed by highly heated rocks deep below the surface. From time to time, some of this deep-seated water may be returned to open air in the stream of volcanic eruptions. And I think I'm going to call it there tonight. If you want to pick up where we've left off, as always, you can find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. The work of Phyllis Wheatley. On Virtue. O thou bright jewel, in my aim I strive to comprehend thee. Thine own words declare wisdom is higher than a fool can reach. I cease to wonder, and no more attempt thine height to explore, or fathom thy profound. But O my soul, sink not into despair. Virtue is near thee, and with gentle hand would now embrace thee. Hovers o'er thine head, fain would the heaven-born soul with her converse. Then seek, then caught her for a promised bliss. Auspicious queen, thine heavenly pinions spread, and lead celestial chastity along. Lo, now her sacred retinue descends, arrayed in glory from the orbs above. Attend me, virtue, through my youthful years. O leave me not to the false joys of time, but guide my steps to endless life and bliss. Greatness or goodness, say what I shall call thee, to give me a higher appellation still. Teach me a better strain, a nobler lay, O thou enthroned with cherubs in the realms of day. An hymn to humanity. Though for this dark terrestrial ball forsakes his azure paved hall a prince of heavenly birth, divine humanity, behold what wonders rise, what charms unfold at his descent to earth. The bosoms of the great and good with wonder and delight he viewed, and fixed his empire there, him close compressing to his breast. The sire of gods and men addressed, my son, my heavenly fair. Descend to earth, there place my throne, to succour man's afflicted son. Each human heart inspire to act in bounties unconfined, enlarge the close contracted mind, and fill it with thy fire. Quick as the word with swift career, he wings his course from star to star, and leaves the bright abode. The virtue did his charms impart, their God, then thy raptured heart, perceived their rushing God. For when thy pitying eye did see the languid muse in low degree, then at thy desire descended the celestial nine. Over me methought they deigned to shine, and deigned to string my lyre. Can Afric's muse forgetful prove, or can such friendship fail to move a tender human heart? Immortal friendship laurel crowned, the smiling graces all surround, with every heavenly heart. On imagination. Thy various works, imperial queen, we see how bright their forms, how decked with pomp by thee. Thy wondrous acts in beauteous order stand, and all attest how potent is thine hand. From Helicon's refulgent heights attend, ye sacred choir, and my attempts befriend, to tell her glories with a faithful tongue. Ye blooming graces triumph in my song. Now here, now there, the roving fancy flies, till some loved object strikes her wondering eyes, whose silken fetters all the senses bind, and soft captivity involves the mind. Imagination, who can sing thy force, or who describe the swiftness of thy course, soaring through air to find the bright abode, the imperial palace of the thundering God. We on thy pinions can surpass the wind, and leave the rolling universe behind. From star to star the mental optics rove, measured the skies and ranged the realms above. There in one view we grasp the mighty whole, or with new worlds amaze the unbounded soul. The winter frowns to fancied raptured eyes, the fields may flourish and gay scenes arise. The frozen deeps may break their iron bands, and bid their waters murmured o'er the sands. Fair Flora may resume her fragrant reign, and with her flowery riches deck the plain. Sylvanus may diffuse his honours round, and all the forest may with leaves be crowned. Showers may descend and dews their gems disclose, and nectar sparkle on the blooming rose. Such is thy power, nor thine orders vain, O thou the leader of the mental train. In full perfection of thy works are wrought, and thine the sceptre over the realms of thought. Before thy throne the subject passions bow, of subject passions sovereign ruler thou. At thy command joy rushes on the heart, and through the glowing veins the spirits dart. Fancy might now her silken pinions try to rise from earth and sweep the expanse on high. From Tithon's bend now might Aurora rise, her cheeks all glowing with celestial dyes. While a pure stream of light o'erthrows the skies, the monarch of the day I might behold, and all the mountains tipped with radiant gold. But I reluctant leave the pleasing views, which fancy dresses to delight the muse. Wind austere forbids me to aspire, and northern tempests damp the rising fire. They chill the tides of fancy's flowing sea, cease then my song, cease the unequal lee. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use, so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiku. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.